I watched all 5 episodes of WWE Unreal. They dropped the entire first season on Netflix, so I got through it in about 3 days. I say first season because it's already been confirmed for a second season in 2026. At the end of the last episode, they have a banner that says more episodes coming next year. And in a nutshell, if you are not a WWE fan, I think you will find it all very fascinating. How the whole process works of putting the shows together, what all the different terms mean, and you will gain a newfound appreciation for what these men and women do and how real it can get out there in the ring in terms of injuries and behind the scenes as far as people having panic attacks and all kinds of stuff like that. It really puts a human face on the people that you see on TV. If you are already a fan, I think you'll find that stuff very interesting also, but you may have more of an interest in, for example, how the sausage is made when it comes to creative plans and things that may have been planned but didn't end up happening, or why certain things happened the way they did. That is assuming you can trust that everything you see on this show is 100% on the up and up, which I don't believe it is. Remember, you're only seeing what they want you to see. But if you understand that coming into it, I think it's a fine series. I don't personally like how open they are now with some of this stuff, but that's just the old school fan in me. Like, I'd be lying if I said I didn't find some of that stuff interesting. Like what happens when they get back to the gorilla position after their match and seeing everyone's reactions to their matches. And if you've ever watched a behind the scenes documentary on the making of a movie, like on a movie DVD, this is the WWE version of that. I like watching those too, even though I know, Al Pacino didn't really kill Robert De Niro at the end of Heat. I know that. But with wrestling, there was always that suspension of disbelief, even outside the ring, like when the cameras were off, that these two people, they really didn't like each other. Like back in the territory days, certain promoters, I think Bill Watts was one, where if you were a babyface and you were caught traveling with a heel, like in the same car, like you could be fired for that. That was back in the real days of kayfabe, and kayfabe has slowly but surely been eroding, ever since, really over the past few decades, down to practically nothing now. So setting aside my own personal feelings on that, like this is just the way things are now. The curtain has been pulled back, and if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you are a diehard wrestling fan who spends a lot of time on the internet and a lot of time on social media reading about all sorts of backstage news and rumors and gossip. So it's not like you don't already have a pretty good sense of what goes on behind the scenes. If it creates new wrestling fans who watch the WWE shows on Netflix, then to Netflix, it's a success. And if it doesn't, then maybe it'll give you a greater appreciation for what goes into putting these shows together. You also don't have to watch it if you don't want to. I would rather not see them promoting the writing team and like talking about putting together the storylines like during the actual shows. That's the only thing I really don't want to see them doing. Like I hated it when Russo incorporated it into WCW storylines, with Goldberg not following the script and all that bullshit. And I really hope they don't get into the habit of talking about some of that stuff during Raw and SmackDown. One thing that is patently obvious watching this is that this is a series built around Paul Levesque as the star. Make no mistake, he is the star of the show here. He gets the most screen time out of everybody. He is the primary narrator. When people come back through the curtain, they go to him for his approval. And when they're in the creative meetings, because he's the chief content officer, right? He's the star of the show. He is the star of the show. He is the main character on this show, and that is by design, I am sure. So if you are not a Triple H fan, you're going to hate this. But the first episode, it focuses primarily on the build-up to the first Raw on Netflix. Shocking, I know, for a Netflix series here to be covering the premiere on Netflix. Rhea Ripley, I'm just going to go through some takeaways from each episode. I'm not going through them, scene by scene, but like Rhea Ripley was very much aware of the fact that her feud with Liv Morgan, which had been running for about 3 years at that point, needed to come to an end. Like even she was like, all right, this has gone on long enough. And they got into, how they got to their world title match on that show with Rhea's injury the year before, and then Dom turning on Rhea to be paired off with Liv. So they got into all that. John Cena kicked off his retirement run that night by declaring for the Royal Rumble, so they covered that. And CM Punk's return to the company in 2023, up until the match that he had that night with Seth Rollins. And they included some backstage footage from Gorilla from the night that Punk returned after he came back through the curtain, which was cool. Like stuff like that I enjoy. And by the way, they dedicate an entire segment to explaining to people what the Gorilla position is and how it's constructed, who the different agents and producers are, and where they sit. Like, I thought that was pretty neat. And they talk about how important it is to hit your cues and not go overtime with the shows, even though now we're on Netflix. You would think that you have the flexibility to make the shows as long as you want them to be. But they still do have limitations. So that was the kind of the crux of episode 1. The second episode was called Push, and it focused a lot on Jey Uso getting the rocket strapped to him and the decision to have him win the Royal Rumble. And in the writer's room, and again, I'm watching this entire series thinking, this is what we're seeing, but like, what about the writer's room scenes that we don't see? But in the writer's room, when Levesque threw it out there to, who do you think should win the Royal Rumble? Most of the hands raised were for CM Punk. The favorites were CM Punk or John Cena, until Michael Hayes floated the idea of, what about Jey Uso winning? And actually, I should specify here, it was Ed Koskey. Ed Koskey has been on the creative team and has worked there for over 20 years. And he was one of those people that you didn't know a whole lot about. I didn't even know what he looked like. And so you get some insight into who he is and what his role is. But it was Ed Koskey, who is their senior vice president of creative writing, who first said that he wanted to find a way to get Jey into one of the top spots of WrestleMania, but he just couldn't figure out who then gets left out. Right? If you put Jey in there, someone's getting bumped out, and he just couldn't put the pieces together and figure out who that would be. And then Michael Hayes also pushed for Jey to win because you got to strike when someone is hot, and he's not wrong. Jey winning the Rumble felt like it came out of left field, but remember what I was saying going into that show, right? Don't count out Jey Uso. He could very well win. He was super over. There was a story there to tell with him finally winning the big one. And that's what they did. But what Koskey was referring to was the planned WrestleMania main events this year were Cody Rhodes against John Cena and Gunther defending the World Heavyweight Championship, but not against Jey Uso, against CM Punk. And isn't it funny how they finally got the WrestleMania main event they wanted at SummerSlam? Jey got his run, and then they got it off of him as quickly as they could so they could get to the match they really wanted to do in the first place. And it makes me wonder, if they had it to do all over again, if they would do the same thing, or would they stick to their original plan? They didn't ask that question. The thing that got the most discussion, though, coming out of this series and this episode was the original lineup for WrestleMania 41, which they showed on a whiteboard in the writer's room. This is where feelings are going to get hurt with this show, like if you're a talent. The original WrestleMania lineup for this year look like this: Cody Rhodes against John Cena, Gunther against CM Punk, Roman Reigns against Seth Rollins, Rhea Ripley against Bianca Belair for the women's world title. I am actually very happy that Io Sky was inserted into that match. Like, we still need to get Rhea and Bianca at some point one-on-one, but I'm very happy with the change that was made there. Bad Bunny against Dominic Mysterio, the Wyatt Six against the Judgment Day, Jade Cargill against Nia Jax for the WWE Women's Championship, Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair as partners against Asuka and Kairi Sane for the women's tag team titles. I don't know that Asuka was ready to be back at that point, so maybe that played a role in why we didn't get that match. Randy Orton against Kevin Owens, Drew McIntyre against Braun Breaker, with Stone Cold Steve Austin as the guest referee. This sounds like something that I would book in one of my Be the Booker segments, the end of the streams. Rey Mysterio with Travis Scott in his corner, I guess as a babyface, against Chad Gable. and 2 ladder matches, one for the Intercontinental title with Jey Uso, Damian Priest, Sami Zayn, Sheamus, Bronson Reed, and Ludwig Kaiser, and then one for the United States Championship with LA Knight, Jimmy Uso, Andrade, Solo Sikoa, Santos Escobar, Carmelo Hayes, and Shinsuke Nakamura. It is definitely a stronger card because of the 2 ladder matches, and with Punk against Gunther for the world title. Otherwise, I wouldn't say that it's that much stronger than the one that we got. It's stronger, but it's not like that much stronger. And that Randy Orton-Kevin Owens match was not happening anyway because of KO's neck. Travis Scott coming out with Rey Mysterio would have been fine as compared to where he ended up on that show. I'm curious how they would have arrived at Drew McIntyre and Braun Breaker, seeing as how both of them were heels at the time. Breaker would have been pushed as the babyface there, obviously. And how Stone Cold would have gotten involved, I have no idea. But, he would have at least had an actual role on the show. Instead of just coming out and almost, mowing people down with his ATV and then announcing the attendance. I do wonder if him still recovering from his knee replacement. I think he had a knee replacement in January. Maybe it wasn't January. Maybe it was a little bit earlier, but it was sometime around then, I feel like. He had a knee replacement done. And so I don't know. I mean, did that play a role? Maybe he was like, I don't know if, being a referee, you got to get up, you got to go, you got to fall down, you got to get up, you got to fall down. I don't know if that played any kind of role in him not doing this, but one name I don't see on this list is Tiffany Stratton. I don't see her anywhere in that lineup. Charlotte Flair against Tiffany Stratton was a better choice than Jade Cargill against Nia Jax. And Sheamus going for the Intercontinental title would have been great if they told the story of that being the one title left that he really wants to win but never has, and him winning it at WrestleMania and standing on top of that ladder holding it high. Like, that would have been a great moment. The third episode was heavily focused around the women, namely Charlotte Flair and her return from her knee injury. Chelsea Green got a lot of airtime here, which was very cool, and Bianca Belair. I thought it did a really good job of humanizing them, and they all came off very likable. See, this is where a show like this can be very effective, and it can actually be a great thing for individual talents when you get to focus on them in such a way where you really do learn something new about them, or you just get to kind of look at them or appreciate them in a different kind of way, where they come across very likable. That's where a show like this could be a bonus and can almost supplement, what you see on the main shows. Triple H also had a very telling comment near the end backstage. He was talking to Shane Helms, and this was after the Women's Elimination Chamber match, and he told Helms that the pacing and the understanding of the moment and everything they did, doing what they needed to do, it was better than the guys. And he said how for every great male talent they have at the Performance Center right now, they have 5 great women who pick things up quickly. They do have a lot of really good female talents down there at a time when they don't really have that many standouts on the men's side. And I don't know why that is. Episode 4 was all about John Cena's heel turn, and it opened with a doozy. It opened with The Rock saying that his final boss character is the greatest heel that professional wrestling has ever seen. Mr. McMahon is the greatest heel that I have ever seen. And it's not even close. So that just isn't true. Now, maybe if Rock was still around full time and played that character, either weekly or, regularly on TV, and we had more segments like the one outside in the rain in front of Cody's bus where he bloodied him up and he was whipping him like a dog with the weight belt, maybe he could have worked his way higher up the list. But as much as I like the final boss character, he is not the greatest heel that wrestling has ever seen. But I can totally believe that The Rock believes that. Nick Khan also tried to pin, this was great, he tried to pin slow ticket sales for the Elimination Chamber on the, quote, tough Canadian economy. Oh, yes, I'm sure that's the only reason. I'm sure that's the primary reason why ticket sales slowed for that show. It's that tough Canadian economy. and not the insane prices that his company charges for tickets. So I found that very amusing. At no point did they get into any discussion about Rock wanting Cody to turn heel heading into the Elimination Chamber, and Cody and others being resistant to that idea, or any of the stuff that leaked out in the weeks that followed the John Cena heel turn. So basically, the real juicy stuff that I would have actually been interested to see was not here. Instead, they kept it to coming up with the idea to turn John Cena heel because they felt Cena versus Cody, babyface against babyface, was too vanilla for a WrestleMania main event. And instead, we got Brian Gewirtz, who, of course, is Rock's right-hand man. He's like his chief of staff, his chief writer. We had him on camera here talking about pitching an idea. What we did was we pitched an idea for Cody to turn down The Rock's offer to sell his soul at the Elimination Chamber, only for Rock to then book an impromptu match on the spot between Cody and Kevin Owens for the WWE Championship. Kevin Owens, who had just wrestled Sami Zayn in an unsanctioned match earlier in the show. Cody had no match. This is not like a Money in the Bank cash-in situation where Cody just had a big match and he's tired, and like this is like the opposite of that. Owens had wrestled a brutal match on the show earlier against Sami. And then you would have Owens come out and beat Cody to win the WWE Championship. And there is so much wrong with that idea. Like, not the least of which is being in Canada. Owens would have been cheered like crazy over Cody if that happened. If he wins the championship in Canada. Right? And also, they had already closed that chapter with Owens and Cody in their ladder match at the Royal Rumble. They had already been feuding for a few months. Not to mention his neck injury that they didn't even know about. Like, what a fucking disaster that would have been had they put the title on him with the idea that he's going to be the champion through WrestleMania, which I assume was the plan, because why would you change the title more than once right before WrestleMania? Kevin Owens against Cody Rhodes again in the WrestleMania main event would not have made any sense. But the fact that he wasn't going to be medically cleared anyway, like, it would have been a disaster. And Ed Koskey said the overall framework of the idea worked, but they had an issue changing the title so close to WrestleMania. I mean, they did it with Rhea Ripley, but I agree. Changing the WWE title that close to WrestleMania in favor of a Mania match that would not have had as much marquee value really would not have made any sense whatsoever. And also, and you know I'm right, like, you would have gotten the same complaints from all of the Kevin Owens fans when he turned around and dropped that belt a month later that, oh, he deserved a longer run. He got screwed. How disrespect, what a slap in the face to Kevin Owens. Like, it's not, like they would, in the moment, they would have been happy to see him win the championship. But then as soon as he dropped it a month later, it would have been nothing but a shitstorm. So there were so many things wrong with that idea that if that was actually pitched, I'm glad it didn't go through. Bruce Pritchard was the first to suggest John Cena turning heel, even though in past interviews, Triple H has talked about it like he came up with the idea and pitched it to Cena. So then Triple H explained the process of getting everybody on board for an idea this big, and how there were 5 people that he needed to loop in. Nick Khan, who loved it, The Rock, who loved it, Travis Scott, who in his words, we want to build this idea around, which is an unbelievable thing to say. Cody Rhodes, who was surprised by the idea when Triple H called him. He thought he was calling to pitch something else. Yeah, I wonder what. I'm sure Cody was relieved. And then finally, John Cena himself. In that order. In that order. He called Travis Scott before he called John Cena to pitch the idea of a John Cena heel turn. Something is very wrong with this picture. And that was it. Those were the only people who knew about it. Levesque said that he told the wrestlers in the men's chamber match that there's going to be an aftermath, but he didn't give them any specifics about what was going down. Michael Hayes said that Levesque pulled him aside at the show and told him the plan for Cena to turn heel, and he said there were people who are in the know on these things, 9 times out of 10, who were not in the know on this plan. Even people in the production truck. Like Triple H, He only told them what they needed to know. Hey, we're going to be doing something. And they showed him at Gorilla giving instructions, feeding instructions to the camera operators and the people in production in real time, like on what camera shots to cut to, but like did not actually tell them what was about to happen. The announcers had no idea what was about to happen. It was a well-guarded secret, as it should be. You want to keep it to as few people as possible because what made it work so well was the surprise factor. If people knew that John Cena was turning heel, it doesn't work. Them taking us through the angle step by step from the behind the scenes perspective was very interesting. As great as that angle was in a vacuum, time is not going to be kind to it on the follow-up. And the follow-up is what really matters most. Same thing with Hogan, which is still the greatest heel turn of all time. And that's what everybody was comparing it to after the Elimination Chamber. Some people said that the John Cena heel turn surpassed the Hulk Hogan heel turn as the #1 heel turn of all time, which is, of course, ludicrous. Even The Rock, by the way, when he was on Pat McAfee's show, The Rock, who was part of the fucking angle, had to say that Hogan, the Hollywood Hogan thing is still, the #1 thing when the NWO was formed. But even that, like, if Hogan turned heel, as shocking as that moment was, and then they went on to completely just crap the bed, right? It would still be looked at as this huge moment, but it would not be looked back on and revered in the way that it is. But you see what the aftermath of that was, right? It led to this incredible boom period in WCW and during the Monday Night War, and it created one of the great heels of all time in Hollywood Hogan. And there were so many things that came out of the formation of the New World Order. So you look at that and go, man, this really was the greatest heel turn of all time. Look at what it led to. I don't think time is going to be kind to this. As shocking as the moment itself was. There was so much excitement for what a heel John Cena would look like. And I say look like in terms of what he does with the character, in terms of does he get new music? Is his look good? Like there was so much excitement over what is this going to look like? And what is this alliance going to look like with The Rock? And then they just shit the bed with the whole thing. The final episode of the series is focused on WrestleMania 41, the build to the show, the actual show itself. Just a few things from this. There was a lot made about the heat, supposed heat between Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton heading into their women's championship match. The now infamous segment in Chicago where Charlotte was so loudly booed. I said this at the time. I go, she allowed herself to be rattled. Like she was rattled. She was gotten to by the reaction from that crowd. She admitted that here in the episode. She said that it was so loud that it rattled her. And they aired a clip of like Flair cutting off Tiffany during the promo and talking about, oh, your voice is so squeaky. And she starts sounding like a fucking bird. And oh my God, it was so bad. It was so awful. And they even showed a shot from Gorilla at the time of Bruce Pritchard just sitting there, and he throws his hands up like, what is going on here? And that's when Tiffany responded by telling Charlotte that, you would be all alone, just like you are outside the ring. And she mocked Charlotte for being 0 for 3 in marriages. And that was her mic drop moment. And that's when Charlotte, just out of desperation, claimed, oh yeah, well, is that why, Kaiser is in my DMs? And this thing just went completely off the rails. So they showed, like, at the gorilla position after Levesque is asking Tiffany, and one of the writers on the creative team, like, was all of that in the script? And they said, no, it wasn't. It was, improvised. Ed Koskey was telling him, the divorce line was not written into the, segment, and it sent Charlotte over the edge. And Levesque said, look, you got to let Tiffany know that's not how we do things here. He said she needs to go apologize to Charlotte. They need to get on the same page. They aired footage from a creative meeting. Levesque said that he felt CM Punk should go over in the WrestleMania main event, which Bruce Pritchard agreed with. And he questioned whether Paul Heyman should fuck over Punk. And he laid out a scenario where Heyman tried to screw Punk over by helping Roman Reigns, and yet Punk still would go on to win the match, which would sort of negate Paul Heyman turning on CM Punk if he turns on CM Punk in the WrestleMania main event and Punk still goes on to win anyway. It's kind of dumb. Ed Koskey said as much. He hated the finish. He said Punk going over was great, but he felt like it was more shocking to have Heyman leave with Seth Rollins. And Levesque told him, look, I see your point. I'm not sure I agree with that. He said Roman Reigns would be dead in the water in that scenario. He said Reigns wouldn't be a babyface. He wouldn't be a heel. And he didn't have, anything around him that made him successful. And then he's going to be beaten by CM Punk. And Koski said, well, that's what makes the idea so interesting to him. So CM Punk was going over in the Night 1 WrestleMania main event this year until he got talked out of it. Paul Levesque got talked out of it, which makes you wonder, what would Seth Rollins be doing right now if that went down the way that, Levesque originally wanted it to? Where would we be right now? Everything is built around Rollins and this new supergroup. Where would he be right now? And then they showed highlights of some of the WrestleMania matches and then the reactions when they came back, to Gorilla. Now, one of the things coming out of that show that I was wondering was it looked like Tiffany Stratton got her teeth broken in that match. And then it was like, oh, well, maybe it's just lipstick or whatever. So we got our answer here. She comes back because they were even saying that, as they're watching on the monitors, like, oh, shit, she broke her teeth. So she comes back and Levesque goes over and asks her about her teeth and they were damaged. But she said, oh, that they're fake. Don't worry. She's like, everybody here wears fake teeth. So there you go. There's your answer. They did get damaged, but they were not her actual teeth. So all is well. John Cena had an interesting comment here as he was talking about the main event. He said the crowd may have been against Cody because they were more on Cena's side. I think it was more because it's his retirement year. And they wanted to see him break the record and win number 17. But Cena said the crowd may have been against Cody, but he could tell from the noise that they did not want him to lose. They did not want Cody Rhodes to lose that match. He pointed, there was a moment where there was a visual pinfall that Cody had. And he said that if the people were against Cody, they would have booed him out of the building, but they didn't. And he pointed out the reaction when Travis Scott pulled the referee out of the ring while Cody was going for a pin. And Cena said if the fans really hated Cody that much, then they would have cheered, which they didn't do. And I'm glad he was saying this stuff because I still have people who are trying to tell me that, Cody has to go heel now or he should have gone heel, already. And, everyone's just obsessed with Cody Rhodes going heel, which will happen at some point. But just the idea that it has to happen now because the crowds are turning against Cody. Oh, we're hearing some of the boo birds now. Yeah, you hear some. But it's not anything overwhelming. It's nothing like when John Cena was on top, getting 50-50 mixed reactions. And here you have John Cena saying, if these people really didn't like Cody Rhodes, they would have been reacting a lot more positively, when these things were happening to him, or they would have reacted negatively when it looked like he was going to win. And that wasn't the case. But yet you still have these people who think Cody has to go heel. It's very humorous to me. But, in showing some of the highlights of that WrestleMania Night 2 main event, they really polished that turd up real good. Like when Travis Scott made his entrance, they cut out most of it because it took so damn long for him to come down to the ring. Of course, they never addressed The Rock not being there. They never addressed any of the controversy coming out of that match. Controversy enough that Rock felt the need to go on Pat McAfee's show to do damage control. They did not address any of this stuff. And I didn't really expect them to get into it, like any of the real controversial stuff, because it's a WWE production. Or at least it's one that they had a hand in. So again, there were some things that would have been very interesting to kind of know the inside baseball on that were not even touched upon here in this series. But again, the thing I liked the most about it was some of the backstage footage at Gorilla. When people come back from their matches, getting to know more about the individual producers and the agents that make the show run the way it does. People like Triple H and Bruce Pritchard and Michael Hayes, right? They're always the most visible when it comes to that stuff. But getting to see people like Abyss and Bobby Roode or Ed Koski and people like that you don't really think about. They're there, but you really don't know too much about them. You don't know too much about what they do and what they're responsible for. And again, how much these people are responsible for making sure these segments go off the way that they're supposed to and how they react when they don't. That can be very fascinating to watch here in this series. Even though I will say it still feels like I really should not be allowed to watch this at all. I still feel like why am I seeing all of this laid bare for all of us here on TV? But I thought it was a fun watch. It was a fun watch on the whole. I hope in season 2 they spotlight people we didn't get to see too much of here, and maybe the announcers and what goes into that aspect of things, because it's not an easy job, and it's a very important job. So I would love to see what their process looks like and what's being fed to them, on any given night. See, this is where a show like this with Vince at Gorilla would have been far more entertaining. Just watching him scream into his headset like a stark raving lunatic.